Welcome to PMI Champlain Valley's 2021 Winter Webinar Series. This is session number 10 for Technical Project Management. We'd like to take a moment to thank all of our event sponsors for the series. We couldn't have managed to bring you the quality of speakers and content without their support. Those include Anton GM, Newgrange IT Consulting, FCG Integration Orchestration, the Moray Group, Fortean, Echo Consulting, Burton, Centro Pietro Project Management, and who doesn't love pie? So thanks, pie. We'd also like to thank our chapter sponsors, UVM Continuing and Distance Education, offering many adult learning opportunities, including a project management certificate course. Learn more at learn.uvm.edu. And Desai Management Consulting, offering PMP and PMICV exam preparation courses, as well as Scaled Agile Framework Leader and Scrum Master certification courses. Learn more at desaimgmt.com or via pmicv.org. And now for the last time for the series, we'd like to welcome our presenters and our panelists for this evening. Just to note that we're sorry to say Al Marin couldn't make it this evening, but we're hoping that Jason Lachelle will join us in his stead. Also, we have Anne-Marie Curley, Dale Van Leeuwen, Andrea Ovani, Alcide Santo Pietro, Paul Durand, Marcus Glauaz, Molly Yanis, and I think that's everybody. So thank you. And just to say, while it would be an exhaustive exercise to review everybody's backgrounds, education, and credentials once again, it goes without saying that the quality of our panelists, as well as the content of their presentations for this series, was extraordinary. On behalf of PMI Champlain Valley leadership and general membership and non-member guests of the series alike, a very heartfelt thank you to you all. We really appreciate your participation. All right. Our first question for the panelists tonight, Susan Skelka asks, do you ever feel like all of the tools and techniques and books and so on for project management are overkill and industry and of itself that may not be necessary, or maybe not be necessary in all cases? Sometimes is it best to just keep it simple and stay organized without all of the jargon, etc.?
Absolutely.
Yes, no jargon.
Sure. Molly hit it first. Go for it, Molly.
Absolutely. So that was one of the reasons that I went out on my own, was that I was feeling like small to mid-sized businesses, frankly, didn't have a project management framework or tools that really were right size for them, that there was a lot of overhead, and that project management as a discipline felt overwhelming or just really heavy. And I wanted project management to be more accessible, and this idea that everyone is a project manager. You manage projects day-to-day life. If you're buying a house, you are definitely managing a project. And so how do we make it more approachable, more accessible? And one of those ways is exactly as you mentioned in your question, which is, cut out that jargon, use examples that make sense to, everyone versus just people that have that technical experience. And so absolutely. I think in general, the biggest issue I have with project management as a discipline, regardless of what framework you're using, is that it often is making assumptions of full-time resources. And I find that that is not my experience, especially with small to mid-sized companies, but even larger companies where there are business users that are part of a project, but they're not full-time project resources. So how do we explain project management, and instead of making it, the boogeyman, actually something that helps them feel effective, cuts down on churn, and really, shows progress and results.
I think we should get Molly to write a new book on project management and simplicity.
I wish. So they're asking for a podcast, Paul. I'm so talkative.
Hey,
there you go. That's even easier. That way you can listen to it while you go for a jog.
Any other thoughts on that? I'm going to try to.
Yeah. So can I just add to that? I mean, I think we are laden full of jargon, and I think most organizations don't have dedicated project managers, and many of the project managers that do exist aren't able to bridge the gap in talking to teams. So we've got technical project managers who cannot talk to business teams. I've got, people have to step in and bridge that gap and be able to connect the dots. And I call it actually, we need project leadership, not necessarily project management. And we need people to be able to step into that leadership role and connect the dots between their teams. And we need to take the jargon out of it. I've actually been writing a series of blogs that are about midway through for project management for everyone. And it's just the whole concept is that we should be taught how to manage projects at middle school and high school. And it should be a requirement right out of the gate as a professional skill. You might not be managing a massive project. I'm managing one right now that has over 100 people on it. You might not be managing that level of a project, but projects are how work gets done within organizations. And functional managers, individual contributors, technical leads, all of these people manage projects on a day-to-day basis, and they're doing so without necessarily knowing the right skills or the right questions to ask at the right time in the process. And I saw a question in the list around PMBOK 7 and where that's going, and it's going around sort of the principles of what's the right questions to ask at the right time versus things being a framework and very structured methodology that you need to follow. So I think that's heading in the right direction.
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
I agree. One of my early career mentors said that if I could not describe what I did for a living in 2 sentences or less without jargon, then I didn't understand what I was doing. and I needed to be able to bring that to clarity for myself. And that's something that I've really found helpful over the years, is just speaking in plain language to people.
Yeah.
You know, and I find project management so full of acronyms and terms. And it breaks down to, as the question noted, staying organized and finding the best way to do that for you and your team to make sure that you're getting results, because that's ultimately what projects are about.
Okay.
And to keep
Awesome.
it real simple, if you keep the jargon down and you just explain things so that everyone can understand them, you're going to get buy-in from the entire team. And without buy-in, your project's a failure as it is. So, you know, getting buy-in from every member, I think, is more important than sounding like you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, agreed.
Right.
And I'll move on to the next question. Great responses all. We've got so many to get through. Yeah, and I can just say briefly that we do, you know, we get so many inquiries into PMICV about folks trying to go for their PMP, and the thing that's most overwhelming to them is all these terminalities, all these acronyms, and everybody who's gotten their PMP knows it's just like you're just drilling it into your head. And what percentage of it do you actually use in your real job as a project manager? Well, I think it varies job to job, industry to industry, but there's certainly a lot there. So thank you for that question, Susan. Let me share my screen again and we'll get to the next question. So next question comes from Mark Haberl. We often see a disconnect between traditional procurement vehicles, e.g. RFP, and the tendency for agencies to acknowledge the cool new paradigm, e.g. Agile. Curious to hear about methods and means of managing the friction between clearly stated deliverables and a desire to do the development work in an agile way. And maybe I'm going to ask somebody, maybe Alcides, I know that you do some training with Agile. Would you mind starting off the conversation for this one?
Absolutely. Thank you, Neil. Thanks everyone for having me tonight with you. And indeed, I think it's a situation that we'll be facing more and more, especially in this transition phase when we see agile and traditional methods coexisting. That could happen between a customer and a service provider. It can happen within the same organization that is transitioning from waterfall to agile. And at the moment, there's no right recipe or an equation to resolve that. I think we're still in an experimentation phase when we are learning from each other and learning from our own mistakes on how to deal with that. I mean, we know that agile practitioners, they don't like contracts because, as a general statement, because contracts impose a lot of restrictions, and what we want when we use agile is flexibility, and so flexibility and contracts, they don't go together very well. So we need to learn how to write contracts in a better way, write RFPs in a better way to accommodate this new way of managing projects. And there are some good practices out there, but I think we are mostly in a learning phase yet before we have some sort of standards or best practice that we might follow as a role.
Anyone else on that question? I can put it back up if you need to see it again. Yeah, Paul?
Yeah, I think, Mark pointed out friction between clearly stated deliverables. So if I take a look at those 3 words, clearly stated deliverables, that means if that's true and the scope is not going to change, then it's pretty straightforward. You just drive and get those deliverables done. That could be, you could easily use a waterfall method and succeed very well. And then, if there's a desire to do development work in an agile way, I think that's wonderful, because there's a lot of projects out there where you do not have clearly stated deliverables, and you have to explore and go through iterations and understand what kind of feedback we're going to get from the customers as we do short deployments. So I think they both work together. It's just a matter of what fits for your particular type of project. So there shouldn't be any friction in that statement.
So an example contract that I write for teams that I'm working on that are agile, it typically is referring to results instead of to deliverables. So it's desired results. And the way that my contracts typically work in that space is more, they mirror closer to a staff log, but it's usually a range of, effort. In terms of it, it's more of like a time, which is based on a certain number of sprints or something like that for a certain amount of time versus an actual like deliverable. I don't know if that helps.
Sounds good.
I think that's the challenge, though, for the writers of these RFPs who think that they know what the deliverables are. It's very challenging for an organization that works in an agile methodology to respond to those RFPs that are typically fixed price. And I think that's where the rub and that's where the friction comes in, is that many organizations who work in a more agile fashion just don't even respond to those RFPs, because the concept of being able to do something that's creative and unique, which most projects are, and trying to solve a problem. We're not building widgets. It's often changes, and the concept of something being very fixed and fixed price puts off a lot of people who know that what people say they want and need is often not what they actually need. So right out of the gate, those RFPs tend to be very inflexible, and the people who write them tend to have preconceived notions of how much they want to pay and what they want to get for those dollars.
The client never knows what they want. That's
if there's a discovery process for a reason, right?
Yeah, right. Mark, I saw you unmuted. Did that answer your question well enough? Do you have any other comments on there?
Yes, it did. It absolutely answered my question. I think Anne-Marie's statement at the end is where I was headed with that. There's a lot of institutional momentum, as it were, to follow the traditional procurement process. So if they release an RFP, yes, it is competitive. And yes, you have to answer the question and say, I can build exactly that, or you won't win it, right? And then once it happens, they have multiple divisions, bureaus, whatever you want to call it, inside these agencies, mostly state agencies, what I'm referring to, that each have their own goals and objectives, such as, hey, we want to do this in an agile way. Whereas the sponsoring division just says, I just want my product. I don't care how you get it done. I just want my product. And then this goes back to a previous discussion we had about kind of level setting with the client right off the bat, which is how we solve the problem, as it were. In this specific instance, we said, look, we're happy to engage with you. We had a competitive bid. We won it. But the very first thing we need to do is get all the players together, have that discussion and say, level set, what do you mean by agile? What do you anticipate? What do you expect to see out of this process? And then we'll move from there. But yes, it did answer my question. Thank you.
All right, great. Moving on. Thanks for the question, Mark. Thanks for all your answers, everybody. So our next question comes from Jennifer Lynch. Several panelists touched on influencing executive stakeholders that don't have strong project management backgrounds or interests. And they took away good thoughts about metrics and how to report up and influence. Are there other best practices or recommendations along these lines that the panelists would like to share? And maybe if we can get somebody who haven't, I know, let's see, this may not be your area of expertise, but maybe, I don't know, Dale, would you be willing to start us off? I'm putting you on the spot. You're muted.
Absolutely. Sorry, I was unmuting myself. Yes, I actually do have a fair bit of experience working with stakeholders and steering committees for projects and programs. And one of the really key things that I always like to do when I'm initiating and setting up that governance structure is trying to form a really good relationship with those stakeholders and understand what's important to them. It goes back to a lot of my change management training. What's in it for me? And if you can report on metrics and decide on what's going to show them that you're delivering what they need and what's important to them, you're going to avoid a lot of conflict. So I would say really personalizing it and customizing it to the stakeholders that you're working with.
Any other thoughts on that, other folks?
Yeah, I'd like to add, I mean, I think it's about stakeholder engagement, not stakeholder management. And I think, you know, traditional project management tends to think about management of people versus engagement. And we need to be thinking about engaging our teams, engaging our sponsor, engaging our stakeholders, and building solid relationships with them. And I think the level of information that they need is different than the level of information the rest of the team needs. So I know there was another question about that, and maybe we'll get to it, but you know, we've got to really understand what's driving them, what's their interest in the project, what their influence is, and work really closely with them. And I see this is one of the gaps on client projects. When I get called into rescue, it's often one of the gaps, and there's a huge disconnect between what the executives think and it's going to take to do the work and what is really taking to do the work. And they don't really understand their role that they need to play as an executive sponsor or a stakeholder. So it's really important that project leaders educate them right out of the gate and have a monthly cadence or some sort of meeting cadence where they're in a room together making decisions, understanding what's going on across the team, and they're part of the project and they're engaged in the project from that perspective.
All right, excellent. Okay, thank you all. I'm going to move on to the next question. So Brian Williams asks, for Marcus and Paul, although others may have some things to share as well, but Marcus, maybe we'll start off with you for this one. Are there standards or best practices that you can point us to for project data analytics? This is a dynamic area under digitalization, leading to machine learning and AI, but what are items specific to project data that you have come across? Marcus, would you start us off?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a fairly new area, right? That is coming in for project management, and there's definitely no silver bullet, I would say, right? I mean, it's all about aggregating data. It's about data visualization. It's about data correlation. So these are all these elements where you can find various ways actually to get to it or to get to insights from data, right? So I mean, there are tools like from Microsoft Power BI, or I mean, just Tableau, you know, just aggregate data and you basically visualize data to find basically insights from this and making sense of data. So this is a key point. So you can find various ways of doing it. So there's not one specific practice or tool, I would say, although there's and you can look that up. It's something that's called reference class forecasting, which is actually brought up by Oxford University. So this is basically a statistical method for forecasting. So, you know, where you identify relevant data from past similar projects, then you establish basically a probability curve and then make a comparison of your current project with past projects, and based on this you find the likely outcome. So these are like practices that are slowly coming or going into practice, where you can find insights from data. But generally speaking, it's all about visualizing data and find the correlation to find insights from data. Does that make sense?
Excellent. Yeah. Anything else to add on that? He was also tagging you in that question, Paul.
Yeah. When I was doing my initial design of Pi, I was thinking about, you know, what kind of project data and analytics should we show, and One of the recommendations I would make is take a look at Dr. Harold Kersner's book. It's called Project Management Metrics, KPIs, and Dashboards. It came out a long time ago, but he keeps updating it with new versions. I would say the book is pretty much pre-AI days, but it's still very relevant, and you might find some good standards and best practices in that book.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
I've seen some cool things done mapping project risks, right, to different phases of the project as indicators of kind of like slippage and things like that. I'm working on a project right now, and it started as like a word cloud with some of the risks and things like that. It was very strange, but it ended up moving in that direction of mapping risks and seeing like, are there any indicators that would give us kind of a heads up of forecasting that this project is in trouble, more than just that the date is at risk or the health is being marked as yellow. So I don't know that we have an answer yet, but that's an interesting area that I've seen that
that's
direction.
a signposting technique, Molly. This is Brian. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
There you go.
it's a signposting technique that you do in sort of strategic planning. So I like that idea and applying that to projects. Yeah.
Great. All right, we'll keep moving on. So this next question is in the same vein, I think. And this comes from June Shen Epstein. So thank you, June, for your question. What have you as panelists found to be the biggest unlock in terms of project visibility tools for your teams and stakeholders? Has there been a single silver bullet in terms of dashboards or reports that has satisfied both individual contributors and leadership members at the same time? And can you give an example? And if I could, if I'm not putting you on the spot too much, Jason, thanks for filling in tonight. I'd like to ask you to start off on this one, because maybe it's a little bit of a different perspective that you have, being on the ground floor, working at Burton, and especially as you talk through the transformation that you went through with the help from Echo.
For sure, yeah, thanks. A silver bullet? No. If anybody finds that silver bullet, please let everybody here know. But I will say that some serious gains have been attained by creating dashboards and using calendars via Smartsheet that we've implemented to let people know where their projects are, etc. So, for instance, we have a dashboard in the marketing department where we show where people's projects are in terms of their project phases. So somebody goes into a form and they submit a project, and previously it would just kind of disappear and they would just kind of wonder where it went. But now there's a tracker where they can see who's been assigned to it, what the overall duration is for it, and kind of how it's tracking. We've implemented a few other calendars as well that get a little bit more granular, but it's actually been really well received. And I would say that we are well on our way to getting close to a silver bullet, but definitely not an actual silver bullet.
Anybody else? I think there's a lot to say about this still. Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to say that actually I do have a silver bullet. And basically what it is the team members themselves. If you have, I don't care what kind of tool you have, but if it's a very simple tool that has a lot of adoption and people are going in and using the tool, then the dashboards become alive. They become real. The problem that I've seen with in the past, including my own tool, is that if people aren't using it, the dashboards, no matter how simple, elegant, or fancy they are, they're not being used correctly. You have misinformation or people just give up. So I think the silver bullet is to have a very simple process environment and simple tool to use, very visual, so people adopt and use it.
And a balance of push and pull factors, right? So this idea that you're pulling data from people and you're also pushing data out. And so you're driving them to there in order to get to something that they need to do on their day-to-day basis that they've already adopted. So I think I'm going in line with what Paul said. So it's like we're trying to find something that they've trying to kind of piggyback on something that they've already are used to, and then push that data out to them. So one of the biggest ones for us is to be able to change in project health. It sounds so crazy, but so often in dashboards, and I'm coming into an organization, they have like a point in time data. So whether it's once a month or once a week, and they're sending this out and the status update, and you're not necessarily recognizing the change over time or the change in between. So just being able to notify when something is moving from green to yellow or yellow back to green, and then taking it one step further is actually being able to track time and trends. So you're seeing green, yellow, red over the course of time in project phases, and you can see as the project went up and down. So there's some really cool visuals you can do with that to show over time instead of just a point in time.
Can I just go back though to the premise of the question that June asked, because she was asking, is there a silver bullet to be able to show the same information to multiple stakeholder groups without having to recreate different views? And I would say that each one of those audiences needs something different from the communication, and you need something different from them. So when we're communicating, we really need to be thinking about how we want people to think, how we want them to feel, and what do we want them to do, and tailor our communications around that, be it a status report or a dashboard or whatever it is. And we on our project, we have different stakeholder groups, and we end up creating different sets and snapshots of information that really helps people dial into the information they need to know without having to dig through all the other noise of the project. I have a set of subject matter experts at 6 different organizations. We create a chart that just contains their activities across a timeline, and they don't need to see the 100 or 1,000 of other tasks that the core project team is, but they need to know where their stuff lines up. So we create a view just for them. And that really simplifies the information that they need to see so that they can act on it and that they can keep momentum going, because that's it. At the end of the day, we need them to be accountable for the work that they're doing and be able to do that work. And we need to be able to clear a path for them so that they can do that. So I think really think about who it is you're communicating with, what you're trying to get out of it, and how do you want them to think, what do you want them to feel, and what do you want them to do as a result of the communication.
Another, if I may add something here, and still happy to keep this one going because there's a lot to talk about this one, I think. But what you're saying, Anne Marie, is there definitely like how, who's your audience? And there's more than just those 2 that you called out, June. There's so many dependent on the project and the organization. But one thing that we've done, I mean, our tool of choice at my current employer is Jira. And, we create dashboards. We also have some other ways that we, integrated with Jira to present in, SharePoint sites, et cetera. But, one of the things that we've done is we get feedback on that. So we work that into our agile loop, right? So that we, so that we're always making continuous improvement. So we have a gadget on our dashboards that we get feedback on. Do you have any questions as a user? Is there something missing here? What do you see? So even though we can't engage with everybody, one-on-one or in our daily stand-ups or in our meetings, we did set up a way to get that feedback, and it's been excellent because otherwise this may have come to a second hand via an email, or maybe people just wouldn't have shared those thoughts with us at all. So I found that to be helpful in our practice. Anybody else on this? Please go ahead, panelists.
If I may, just I was writing on the chat, but I'll erase everything now. Yeah, I like all these answers, and actually this question is great, not only because it touches various aspects of this issue. We have the need of fulfilling different needs with the same tool. I think the key here is to have an integrated tool, but with different information coming out, because we don't want to write the same information or enter the same information twice just because you have two different people wanting the same information in 2 different formats. I've seen great dashboards in SharePoint. I've seen great things happening in Excel, and I see Jira overwhelming people. So it's not because a tool is sophisticated that it will work. So I think the key here is whatever works. Or pulls a silver bullet, and that applies not only when we talk about tools, but when we talk about processes as well. Whatever works for you, you should adopt. You don't need to stick to one fixed process, but whatever works, take a piece of one, a piece of another one, and make it work for your team, for your project, for your unique situation. So I'm just confirming what everybody says, I think.
I just think just one note. I think there's a certain risk to be aware of, right? Because now whenever we have stakeholders and different stakeholders with different interests and different levels of influence, we filter based, or we tailor basically this information that we provide to them. There's a risk that we actually filter it in a way that we try to influence them to certain decisions, right? So that we basically, from information that should be more unbiased, let's say, right? We actually put some own bias in that because we want some decisions to be taken in a certain direction, and we know a certain stakeholder has a certain influence, right? And we want to basically direct this whole thing into one direction, right? That happens actually quite often at a smaller level in projects, right? Without project managers or other stakeholders not really become aware of, right? Or do that actually unconsciously. It's just a natural thing, but there's a risk when we actually tailor dashboards or information to different stakeholders, that there's a risk that we actually filter it in a way that it gives gives a different impression if we highlight certain aspects of a project to a stakeholder, but others actually keep that rather not hidden, but not highlighted that much as others, right?
That's a good perspective as well. Thank you. Okay, Jude, I hope that you got some good answers there. We spent some time on that one. We're going to move on, even though we, didn't get something from everybody, but want to move on. So, good. Next up, from Melissa Jennings, thanks for your question. How has COVID shaped your approach to work-life balance? Understanding this is a marathon and not a sprint, what are some of your personal practices to show up every day as the best version of yourself? And I don't know if maybe it's because it had COVID in there, and Andrea, you had spoken, extensively about the shift in the pharmaceutical industry that's happened over this past year to get us these amazing vaccines from multiple organizations that are out there now. Would you take this one to start us off?
Absolutely. And I think the shift in the pharmaceutical world to make sure that we can deliver, not just, can we keep the shelves stocked with what we already do, but can we deliver something brand new so quickly that the push for project management and resources to jump on board and move as quickly as possible has put a lot of pressure on the industry and the people working in the industry to give up part of that work-life balance. And that's really, the technology helps us get so far, but the people behind it is what really brings us over the finish line. Mm-hmm. And with that, the burnout is, there have definitely been weeks where that balance has suffered. And there have been weeks where by the end of the week, I'm like, I think I'm getting sick. But then there's, it's just, you're exhausted. So part of the, my personal practices that I do is making sure that, not just myself, but even like keeping my son sane through all of this. And he's doing the virtual school. The Zoom fatigue is real for all of us. Is, making sure, one, that we are prioritizing ourselves and then prioritizing our projects. And part of prioritizing myself and my son was, if the weather's nice, we take a 30-minute bike ride over a lunch break. Like something so simple, but it's amazing the emotional and mental uplift that it brings to both of us. So it's something as simple as that. I typically wake up earlier now than I ever did. And that's something where, that those morning hours before clients are are hounding you for information, before a facility is waking you up with, oh my goodness, this machine broke last night and we're trying to validate it. What do we do? You have that opportunity to attack a lot of your issues, or a lot of, the carryover from the day before that just you couldn't wrap up. You were too tired the night before. Let it go for a day and pick it up in the morning with fresh eyes. And getting these projects over the finish line so that we can meet production demands is obviously critical for not just ourselves, but the world. And depending on which facility you're working at, whether you're preparing that facility to potentially receive COVID vaccine, or you're already in it, or other life-saving drugs that are here. I mean, the burnout doesn't help any of us. And especially if you're a key player within one of these facilities, if you can't perform, you're risking the rest of your team not performing. Or if your mental aptitude to handle stress or the situations and conflicts within your team is diminished, your team is going to become a toxic environment. So simple things, like I said, wake up early, attack those things before people, when you have full focus, taking those breaks, even midday, whatever report you're working on, it can probably wait a half hour. Whatever, as long as you're not face-to-face with the client, you can take 30 minutes, you can probably eat lunch, take a walk outside, do something so simple. And then I always keep even if I have to stay up late, it's a section of the evening that is dedicated to just sitting down and having dinner.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. And I think, I know that other panelists certainly have more to add to this, but I think the whole thing about one thing that I'd like to ask the panelists as they proceed to answer this question further, and also our participants is, one thing that I'm aware of, in my day-to-day, and I interact with so many people in my job every day. I oftentimes think, most of us, and I'm looking at us here, most of us have family at home, or friends or family, or somebody close that we're still in proximity to especially during this time of isolation, and to really, keep that empathy in mind when you're dealing with all the folks that you deal with day to day. There's some folks out there that don't have anybody in their household that they're with every day. As much as we may get tired of the kids interjecting themselves into our meetings every single day, we're still so grateful to have those people in my life. And I think that we need to remember and empathize and look for everybody else. So maybe along those lines, to keep answering Melissa's question. Look like Dale, you were raising your hand to speak.
Yeah, I was going to jump in. It's been certainly a marathon for all of us, and longer than expected. And one of the adages that I remind myself of is you can't pour from an empty vessel. And so, it's a lot like putting your oxygen mask on first in an airplane. It's so important to take care of yourself so that you can bring your best into your work and family interactions. And so I've had a long battle over the years trying to prioritize myself and be able to take that time for self-care and to make sure that I'm healthy. And it's not selfish. So everybody needs to remember that self-care is not selfish. It's a prerequisite to be able to perform your best. And so take that time for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean,
benefits.
We're more stressed, we're more susceptible to illnesses, including a cold, the flu, COVID. I mean, our bodies are worn down. So, I mean, even you can't take it as selfish. Wear a mask to protect yourself and others. Take care of yourself, and it's going to also add to the protection of ourselves and others.
Let's do a quick round. I'm going to put everybody on the spot. Just give me one thing when I call your name, panelists, and tell me one thing that you do on a daily or regular basis to keep your sanity, to keep your self-care high as we go. Marcus, go. What do you do? What do you do on a regular basis? Not stay up until 1 o'clock in the morning on Panelist.
Yeah, that's not a good idea.
Thank you, Marcus.
Yeah, I mean, I got some new habits basically, so that I get up really early usually, and I go jogging, etc. What I usually didn't do, I did that actually on a more irregular basis, right? But then I saw or realized, as it was mentioned before, I have to take care of myself, because I realized I work actually much more since I'm working from home, much more than I actually ever worked before. So we have to find that balance. So I developed some habits now where I just have certain times, first, going up in the morning, go jogging, or having a break over lunch, not only for lunch, but basically just, I don't know, do some reading or something. So develop some habits, right? That actually can organize myself better, because at the beginning, when everything went to that work from home way, it was kind of, I worked like crazy hours and didn't even realize this, and felt exhausted, right? So then I developed these habits and became much more organized. So I kind of adapted to this new reality, let's say.
Right, great, thank you. And so I just quickly, I'm going to go through each of you. So Molly, what do you do on a daily basis? What are one or two things that you do to keep it real in your PM practice as you go?
How brutally honest do you want me to be?
How brutally honest do you want to be?
My kids spend probably a solid hour to 2 hours on personal screen devices. That's a brutal honesty. I've got a 3 and a 6-year-old, and my 3-year-old had pretty much never seen a screen before COVID. So that's brutal honesty for you. But aside from that, one of the things, this is more personal, but my husband and I have started communicating very openly about what fills up our cup and what drains our cup. So I totally came with what Dale was, which is just like, this person right now is draining my cup. My son, I'll just leave this one thing and then I'm going to let it go. My son gave me great advice. It was a few weeks ago, and I got off a meeting where I was very frustrated. And my son's like, Mommy, if you shouldn't go to meetings with people that frustrate you. So that's a brutal honesty for you as well. I'm just like, I'm very frustrated right now. And he's like, you really shouldn't go to meetings with people that frustrate you, Mommy. All right, I shouldn't say that as a consultant. That's the brutal honesty.
I think that what you really were saying here is have a good laugh. So thanks for the laugh, because that was good. Hey, Paul, what about you? What's something that you do to help out? Just real quick, we'll try to get through a few more folks. Paul Dandrian, what's something that you do to ease the stress?
Well, pre-COVID days, my life was pretty much waterfall. Everything was laid out. Now it's 100% agile. Every day I'm figuring things out. There is one thing that I do every day. I usually, before the US comes online in the morning, I will practice the cello for an hour.
Ah, that's great. That's really great. If you have an outlet like that, that's really wonderful. Really get in the zone, right? I know. Yeah, I understand that at all. Who else? Maybe Jason, do you have any thoughts to share on that from the snowboard lifestyle? What do you you hit the
yeah, other than snowboarding as much as I possibly can, I take at least an hour a day, and I pick up heavy things and I put them down for about an hour and a half. And if I don't do that, like, there's a noticeable difference. Like my quick fix is I go hug my kid. If I'm having a hard time, I hug my kid and I feel instantly better.
I do that.
Yes. Yes.
But when I hug my 17-year-old, it doesn't always go that well. I gotta say. All right, I don't want to skip over everybody else, but we should probably get on to another question. I'm sorry that we lingered on that one. I thought we might get a few laughs, so I did that. So please forgive me. Thanks, Melissa, for the good question. I hope you got some good answers, or you feel you got some good answers. All right, let's see. This one comes from Alcides, and I don't know, Alcides, thank you for your questions. I don't know if you wanted to answer this one yourself. I'll give you that option if you wanted to start off. But switching gears a little bit here, in your opinion, what are the most relevant skills that a young professional aiming to succeed in a project management career in 2021 should have under their belt? A concise question that I think we could really elaborate on well. Alcides, do you want to answer it yourself, or do you want to push it?
This is such a great question, I will let others contribute before I present my opinion. If you don't mind, if others want to contribute, I'll be more than happy to hear you. Or I can speak too, but yeah.
Go ahead, Andrea, go ahead.
I would say that I would look at that in two ways. One being, don't let others silence you, but also on the flip side of that, make sure what you say is truth, because if you sit there and preach that you know more than you do, or you have practices that you don't have and you're trying to impress somebody because you're younger and you're trying to show your worth in the company, you're going to diminish it quicker than you ever had the chance to grow it. So I think that balance of being able to speak up, but in the right way, and have that communication with either your team or, whether it's your upward team, your downward team, or, whoever you have, just making sure that it's truth.
Yeah, I think maybe this goes back a little bit to some of our previous question about all those certifications and all that jargon and what's the I think, and I gotta think, and I'm sorry, I'm older now, so maybe my biases are going to show when I say this, but that people are looking for a quick win, especially when they come in and they're less experienced, right? So it's not an easy task to pull off that PMP, especially right away, or the I'm sorry, I'm losing it right now, but not the PMP when you have less experience, PMI.
Yeah, the associate.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the CAPM. Yeah,
I definitely know that. Sorry. Thank you, guys. So what about that? I mean, obviously, you can't just jump out of school and have that experience, have those certifications.
Experience before credentials.
Yes. Yes.
Totally. And I just popped a book into the chat. This is a great book. Keith Ferrazzi, he wrote Never Eat Alone.
Yes.
His recent book is Leading Without Authority. And it's the concept of being a designated leader, lead yourself first and be accountable. And it talks about how, young professionals can go out and build really strong relationships across their organization and look to co-elevate with other people in the organization and really look to drive outcomes for the organization overall. And I think he has a lot of great resources that I recommend to people, which is really, really good it's all about building relationships and working with others and just assigning yourself to be a leader and doing whatever you can to help fix problems within your area without being asked to do it. And he's got lots of great examples in the book of people who've done that.
Yeah, I got to say, I think that anybody that's been doing this for a while, all the panelists here included, that leading without authority, really, I know that it's such a catchphrase right now, but servant leadership, like really getting a handle on that is going to help you so much as a younger person entering the field. Anybody else on this before we move on?
Ask good questions. I'm going to call out Dale and Sue for curiosity, but it's like ask good questions and Google before you ask the question. It's just advice. If you are asking me a question that is in the top 3 answers for Google, I lose respect for you. I love asking questions. I want good questions, but if you do not Google it and at least make an attempt before you ask me, I don't know. That was my number one piece of advice for the MBA group for sustainability. Just like Google it and then ask it if it's not in the top 3 results. Okay, so that's my advice.
I actually think it's like for the younger generation, it's like the critical thinking. So same thing, like asking why. Actually, you should ask. Like every time you come across something that you're not clear of, you should ask why are we even doing this, right? Because that is often completely overlooked, right? And we know that everything became more dynamic and business environments became more dynamic. So it's not like the traditional methods, this is how it works. And again, right, there's a lot of bias out there, right? Like this, we have always done it this way. So why should we change it, right? So you have to ask those questions, right? Why were we even doing this? And so if you have that and go with that attitude into any discussion, then I think this is the best skill you can have. And I even think like PMPs and certifications, it's not the silver bullet. It's not like the best thing out there, and that's a rule, right? You should ask actually if that's all correct there, right? And that's actually how that evolves, right? At the end, because you ask the question why, then everyone starts thinking about this, and things are starting to change, and that's the whole thing that needs to happen for project management, I think.
Excellent.
If I may just make a comment, combining Marcus's comment and Molly's, when we ask why, that's the type of question that Google can't answer, right? So that's a good one to ask your mentor or others that work with you or are in your surroundings, and I think that's interesting for young professionals or just individuals that are leaving, just graduating. And more specifically in the project management field, which was, you know, a little bit of the reason behind my question. I would say learn different methods of work. Don't stick to one. I mean, don't stick to PMI and say, look, PMBOK is my reference, or don't stick to you know, the Scrum, the Scrum Master, whatever comes from the Scrum Alliance, and just navigate through different methods, because more and more there's no, again, we are using silver bullet as an expression of the evening here. There's no silver bullet, so learn as much as you can, different methods, so have more and more tools under your belt. I think that would be my my recommendation. I'm answering to myself now.
No, that's great. Thank you for the question, and thank you for your answers. All right, let's take another one on here. This one's a little longer to read, so bear with me, and I'll probably leave it on the screen a little longer as we start to talk about it, just so that everybody makes sure that we get everything that's said here. So Mark Hitchcox asks, I'm seeking advice for how to promote and/or advocate for the adoption of more formal project management methodologies at a site that is just finally coming to the realization that these methodologies exist. Our site is a business unit of a much larger company, and what makes this more difficult is that outside of the site, there's never been any corporate recognition of or support given to the topic of project management. Currently, I try to lead by example, and that has helped, but I was hoping that someone on the panel has run into this before and might have suggestions for other things that I can try. Again, I'll leave that up, but I'm going to just open the floor here, not to create cacophony. But...
Yeah, so I can jump into this just briefly. I don't know if Mark caught my talk, but I did a case study on an organization where I had done a PMO assessment, and we started that with a survey that was titled How We Work. And we went out and we asked lots of people across the organization how they accomplished the work. And we didn't actually even use the words project management, and we didn't use the word project. And we just talked about how the work was accomplished across the organization and what the barriers were to success, and where they needed support and where they felt the gaps were. And then from there, we went in and analyzed where were the sticking points and what did people need to be successful, and where could we implement either tools or some process or some more structure in the areas that they needed. What types of work required more structure versus where did people need freedom and the ability to be autonomous. So I think starting by understanding how, if it's either at a team level, how your team works, or how your department works or how your organization works, starting there and starting to evaluate what works versus what doesn't work and where the barriers are, and where do people feel like the red tape is, and then you'll figure out what to do with it from there. And I know Andrea had some comments in the chart on this one too.
Yeah, and one of the things that I found has helped people realize they need it a lot is often identifying where the waste is. And that's one of those, like, you know, we don't need a formal process. Everything works just fine. It's like, okay, but let's look at the waste produced, whether it's a manufacturing waste and you have, 10% of your product is thrown in the trash because it doesn't meet quality standards, or you have employees who their productivity is, only 50 or 60% of their shift. That's waste. And how decreasing the waste, increasing the efficiency, and what the bottom line improvements look like by identifying, hey, if we put it into this process and we follow these step-by-step guides that work, that people have used and seen success, this is what we can do to improve your business. Mm-hmm. So that waste identification is really a big one.
Yeah, and I think I talk about it being about the basics, right? What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Who do we need help from? How are we going to go about it? I mean, that's really what we're trying to do here. So even by starting on simple projects and starting with the basics and those basic questions, you can automatically start to help influence your projects to be more successful. Even by asking, why are we doing this? What's the compelling why? What are the outcomes? And having those conversations up front, you're already starting your team off on the better, the path to success. It doesn't have to be highly structured. It doesn't have to be this big project methodology. And you know, it can be a piece of broccoli, right?
I was just
No
going
more
to jump
jargon.
in, sorry, and
Go ahead,
suggest that, oh, sorry, Alcides.
Go ahead.
I was going to jump in and suggest that if you've been having some initial success with a few people, Mark, talk to them a little bit more, get them on side and see if there's a way that you can get them on board to help you and work together to start demonstrating in larger numbers throughout the organization. So it's really a page from change management.
Right.
Just, you know, start promoting that awareness and give people the desire to change and have them look at your team, you and your team doing a project saying, hey, what are they doing? This is really going well, I'm interested. And then invite them in and it'll grow. It's a slower process, but it's certainly a good organic way of spreading the love, I guess, about project management.
Right. I mean, there's the African proverb, right? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Really applies here. I think what Dale is saying is right, because if you want to go fast, you could slap in a project management methodology and hit the ground running and off you go. But people are going to resist that, and they're going to fight it. And even if you're successful, you're going to meet that resistance. It'll be like pushing a boulder up a hill. Whereas if you can sort of bring them along, show successes, early wins, let them see the results, let them see the outcomes, then the resistance will melt away and people will embrace it.
That's great. I'm going to pull up another question here in just a moment that is in the same vein, but maybe pointing us in a more pointed direction. So I'm going to pull that up a second. I do want to give people props for all the thoughts they're putting in the chat. I really encourage that. As you know, you can see the chat record when you go to watch the video later. So it's super helpful. So the links provided, things like that, wonderful stuff. So keep going. But let me bring up this question here. This one's from Chris Klein. And this is, again, in the same vein as the one we were just speaking to. Chris says, as you know, a theme of project management is that change is inevitable. And where I work, and maybe you as well, there have been attempts at changing the culture to foster the common principles to espouse for agile management. Unfortunately, many of us on the front lines look upon these proposed changes with jaded, cynical eyes because management almost always reverts to their previous non-agile behavior. I'm gonna stick my neck out and say Chris has been working somewhere for a long time. How do you suggest organizations approach changes in management culture, like agile management, that can make the principles a lasting part of the environment rather than a nice thought that gets thrown out because there's real work to be done? I guess you're waiting for me to call on somebody. I was hoping somebody was just going to jump all over.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's back to change management, right? It's back to understanding why organizations resist change, and it's about making that compelling vision for the change you want to see, having the stakeholders be part of it, but you need the sponsors to be bought into that. So this one's, I feel like this is change management 101 versus even being traditional structured versus agile story. Regardless of what you're trying to change, if you're trying to change behaviors and how people are working, then you need to take them on a journey. You need to create that compelling vision. You need to get their buy-in. You need to bring them with you as part of the team and show success, as Dale said.
Okay, great. Any other thoughts along those lines? Our agilists in the neighborhood here?
Yeah, I'd like to chime in with Anne-Marie in terms of a change culture, building that in, because whether you're using agile or waterfall or a combination with hybrid, you gotta have continuous change. You gotta have continuous change with waterfall methods. You gotta have continuous change with agile methods. You know, how do we learn, grow, improve over time, and improve our Scrum and Sprint processes, right? Improve on how we do our waterfalls and how we combine the two. So I think it's spot on to think about change as a cultural thing rather than, you know, one method versus another.
Mm-hmm. And it's really survival now. Change is the norm, right?
Yeah, every day.
Always. Okay. All right.
Change or die.
Yeah. All right. So here we are. So another one from Brian. This one's for Alcides. You brought up the concept of post-project entropy. Do you have some suggestions on ways to fight that entropy post-project?
Yeah, good. So I like the expression was not carved by was not me who coined that expression, but basically when we end a beautiful project and we deliver what we need to deliver, and then we transfer that to operations. Sometimes what all the improvement, all the outcome that we produced just rolls back to the previous state, and that's what we want to avoid. What I suggest is to have a good communication with operations since the beginning of the project, not at the end. That would be maybe my main take here. Instead of transferring your product that you develop at the end of your project to the operations at the end, just keep the operations with you since the beginning of the project, so they get engaged and they become part of the whole process. So the transition will be much more much easier and sustainable. And I think that would be my main suggestion to avoid this from happening. If that makes sense.
Yep. Brian, does that answer your question, or do you want to elaborate on that any further?
No, I mean, that's good. I don't know if anybody else had any comments on that.
I think this is change management also. I agree that operations need to be at the table. They're a key stakeholder for sure. And operational readiness is one aspect. But it's not just operational readiness. It could be like support IT operational readiness, business operations, end user embracing, whatever it is. This goes back to bringing change management activities in as part of your project management methodology and doing those change activities, creating a change team, creating change agents, understanding what users will need to enable them to be successful. And they're part of the journey, and they need to be on the project bus with you as you're taking the journey so that they're ready post day one. And I think we all think that when we launch something or when we go live, it's over, right? That's the project end date, but that's actually day one of most of the work that we're doing. You get something into production, you push something live, that's day one, and then you have to stabilize, you have to iterate, you have to keep refining the workflows and the processes around that. So I think we need to bake that mindset into how we're delivering whatever products or solutions we're delivering, and consider our go live as our first day, not as the project end date. And try to set people up for success.
Right.
Yes, Anne-Marie, yes. Yes, exactly what she said.
All right, thank you guys. Next one from Mark again. I'm sorry, I definitely have a bunch more questions, so I'm gonna try to get through them quickly so we can get there. Sorry that we're, if we don't get to your question, I do apologize. Mark says, please elaborate on one or two additional real world examples of leveraging dark data for some form efficiency specific to software implementation projects. The question is for Mark to start us off, and we'll see where we go from there. Marcus?
Let me just understand the question. So real world examples. Yeah, dark data, of course. I mean, I always use this classic example, right? Like lessons learned. I mean, this is like the all-time classic, I would say, which always goes dark, right? I mean, I think I've illustrated this right back then in the session as well, right? Now we go into lessons learned session. It's all like put together. I mean, in earlier days, probably even offline, right? Like with post-it notes and all this kind of stuff, right? And even if it's right now more digital, then we learn maybe as one project team from this, right? And we go on, but the project has an end, and then the project team dissolves. And where is all this information going? It stays somewhere in some digital folder, some SharePoint or whatever, right? And then it's basically really being used then afterwards, right? Or probably not at all. And the same is actually valid for like project schedules, for example, right? I mean, as part of a project, we use that in a project. So basically you bring it up to a level where you really can gain some knowledge and insights from it, right? In the project, but then the project is over, and this gets stored somewhere, it's gone. Nobody looks at it anymore, it goes dark, right? So that's what I basically also try to illustrate as, you leverage basically data to insights or knowledge, and then all the way back, right? So that becomes dark data, it just sits there. So I always compare that to throwing away waste in the ocean, right? And we're not recycling data, right? And that's basically what happens all the time with a lot of artifacts and projects. And so as these kind of examples, I mean, there are numerous examples. I can think of a load of artifacts that we produce in projects that basically go dark, especially after a project ends. But these are just like 2 examples, right? Lessons learned and project schedules, if that answers the question.
Does that answer the question, or you want to elaborate on that? Feel free.
Oh, that answers the question.
Okay, all right. Okay, let's move on to another one. Although all these questions are great, and we could easily spend an entire session just talking through one of them. So thank you, everybody. This one is from Charlie Sprigg. What do you see as the top opportunities and challenges for project management in the COVID era, or in the modern era, let's call it, right? Where co-location is more rare and physical distance is almost guaranteed. Do you expect this to lead to any shifts in the way technical projects are managed? If so, please elaborate. Are there areas of project management that are ripe for innovation, since the way we work may have been fundamentally changed? It certainly has. So it's really about co-location, and I mean, look at us here, where our chapter would have a dinner meeting a month, and then a symposium or a professional development day once a year or so. And here we are doing things like this, which in some ways is easier and in some ways is so much harder. So what do our panelists say? Maybe somebody we haven't heard so much from. Jason, I'm going to call on you again, since you were working at Burton, and I don't know what the evolution has been for you working there. Have you had to? I'm assuming that at least initially, if not now, that everybody had to go and work from home. And what's the evolution been like for you there, and where do you see it going for your company?
So coincidentally, I'm part of a working group at the company that's, trying to figure out exactly that, like what the future of work's going to look like. Is it going to be, are we going to come back to the office 100%? Is it going to be hybrid? Like, are we going to, expand in hiring for people that are, not co-located? So it's a really interesting topic. But I would say some of the foundational information that we're getting down to is, what do we need from certain positions? Do you need to be able to be physically co-located sometimes? Could you be, could you live in a different hemisphere? But it all really depends on, what's necessary in order to, have the necessary communication that you need with your team. For us in Burton, it's a little bit different, where a lot of people at Burton work here because of the culture, and you go in there and you're surrounded by snowboarding imagery and snowboards and dogs, and I mean that's a big part of why people work there. So I would say, these days working for Burton feels a lot more like working for anywhere else. So there's there's a lot of things to consider there, but
yeah, that's good. No, that's good. Thanks. I mean, I think it's the question on everybody's mind. I just called on you first, Jason, there, because I know that our panelists, although some of them may have worked in an office environment previously, but a lot of folks are contractors or such, and I wanted to get that kind of perspective from you, being in a PMO, where you're at. But please, anybody else, any other panelists talking to this? Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to lump in with the pandemic issue, the political divide our nation has gone through. So it's been stressful for many people, or most people, both the pandemic as well as the political nature of things. And I think a trend that could open up is what I call project empathy. And, taking a look at how it feels to be in someone's pair of shoes. And I think as project team members and project managers, I know there's been a number of articles about project empathy for project managers, but I haven't found any around project team members. So actually I did some research about empathy in general and wrote a blog last week called Project Empathy, and I came up with some games that you could do. Oh yeah. And the idea behind it is to get the team members to start thinking about how other people feel on a project, the challenges that they're going through, and trying to position yourself in their eyes, in their view, in their shoes. So hopefully this is something that might come out of what's happening in our world, that maybe we all will have a little bit more empathy.
We can only hope. That's great. Thanks for those thoughts, Paul. Anybody else on the future of work? Go ahead, Dale. I got you first.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in. First of all, Andrea, the material you put in the chat about opportunities. The other half of Anton Growth Management is actually an executive search firm. So my business partner leads that. And that's probably been one of the biggest shifts that we've seen on that side of the practice. Companies have access to a wealth of candidates that maybe they weren't willing to consider before because we weren't working remotely. And I also have had, like Andrea, the opportunity to interact with and work with people that otherwise I would have had to spend, 15, 20 hours on an airplane to be able to work with them. And it's brought a lot of richness to my experience. And I hope that continues regardless of whether that return to the office is a reality.
Yeah.
Can I add a positive as well, which is when we think about different communication methods, and we often talk about people that talk the loudest or talk the most or in some of these in-person meetings. And I work with a lot of team members that maybe aren't as comfortable in some of those in-person or large meeting gatherings. And I think that with this move towards, at home, I've actually seen somewhat of a more balanced communication in terms of who is able to weigh in on different things when they're forced to do it. You know what I mean? Even in a meeting where you're taking turns around robins, I've actually heard some new voices and perspectives that maybe I wouldn't have heard as much as usual if I was in an in-person meeting. So I think there is some definitely positives, and I'm loving some of the tools that are being used more. Anne Marie used one of a Mentimeter. I'm using that a lot in my meetings, and that push towards individual votes and that data and pieces like that, and even just some more prep to meetings with the virtual. I've seen a lot of really positive trends, I think.
Yeah,
but I do miss the dogs in the office at Burton. I am saying that.
Yeah, my dog misses the other dogs. Great thoughts all, and really it's blown up, huh? The opportunities, as much as there's been suffering, there's also been all these opportunities for all these tools and more that are out there now. The ecosystem has just exploded. But there's good and there's risk there too, because now what tools do I choose, Paul Duran? Should it be Pi? should it be something else?
Just Pi.
Just Pi. Okay, safe answer. All right. Here's one for Andrea. Jamie Gravelin asks, Andrea Uvani, did you get involved with chain of custody or blockchain technology with your work? Really shifting gears here. What do you say?
So blockchain has, at least in the facilities that I have worked with directly, has not been pulled in on pharma, but chain of custody is extremely important. I hope, especially with the severity of impact for COVID, that blockchain or something similar is being used on the digital forefront, because between controlled substances, I worked in facilities that produce and manufacture morphine and fentanyl, and they have to make sure that every gram of product is accounted for. So from raw product through finished packaged product, everything is tracked, and making sure that not a single bottle, whether it's being wasted and disposed of, even the hazardous wastes are tracked. And then for specific drugs, I mean, if you think of the COVID vaccine, it has to be kept at, I don't remember what the temperature is, like -90 degrees or something. You have, part of the custody is not just who has it or who had it last, but what environment was it maintained in.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of, it's even more, like I said, beyond just who has it, but who has it, where is it, what is it being maintained, how is it being maintained, what's the temperature, humidity is, and especially on even when you get to just the packaging, if you look at the syringes and vials that are coming in before any product touches them, that chain of custody is even well monitored, because if those are left on the loading dock for too long and it's a humid day, you have a potential for mold contamination. So, I mean, the chain of custody falls well in line with the CGMP practice, and just who had it, what happened, where was it, what's the temperature, what's that environmental factor on top of all of it.
Great. Has anybody else on the panel, have you been involved with the projects using those technologies? Blockchain or no?
I think the only project that I can at least imagine where you can use blockchain is in the construction industry, for all the contract management piece. But I don't think that is generally applicable in projects, at least to my knowledge. I'm not really.
Maybe some contracts, legal documents.
Yeah, legal documents, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I've not been privy to any of that. But I hope that partially answered your question, but maybe something to consider moving forward here for some future conversations. Thank you for the question. Here's one from Ann Pettyjohn. As a small custom software developer for a number of Fortune 500 clients, we are often given access to knowledge about the inner workings of the organizations where we could offer substantial advice to improve their operations. How would you leverage this knowledge? It's a little open-ended, but also I'm just wondering about, anybody want to try to jump on this one in the first instance?
Yeah, I would ask them what the impact is and offer some suggestions around how they might be able to improve it, and ask if they would like to hear more. Mm-hmm. That sounds like a good opportunity. If you can offer solutions, there's probably problems there, and it's about how eager they might be to solve those problems. So why not offer to help?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, any insights that you could provide in a safe information transfer, being cognizant of what information may be, legally protected. Like, I have to be very careful. I mean, I can talk about facilities. I can talk about the processes with those facilities. I have to be careful not to provide too much information, not to include information on the facility in the same presentation with the product name or the same presentation with the facility name. But a lot of the process and what we do and what we did can still be discussed.
I think, Anne, you've got a diamond in the rough with this, because you've got a one-up on the outside firms who are waiting for an RFP to learn about internal opportunities. My first step would be to look for opportunities that, one, would drive value for the business owner as usual. Two, it's a low chance it will turn into an RFP because you don't want that. And three, maybe you might find a way to invest some of your internal team time at no cost to the client to do some prototyping as a free surprise gift. I'm just making this up as we're going here, but there might be some clever ways to get in, because you've got the insight of what's going on, and that's golden.
And I think coming from a contracts and actually procurement background, I would just be mindful of the fact that it's great if you're going to be helping that particular client with their operations, but then if you choose to take that solution and monetize it for yourself, then there's certainly intellectual property and any work that they've done with you and information that they've shared with you that might have helped you, that you should consider and have some transparent conversations around.
Yeah, that was my first thought of reading the question too. I didn't articulate it right away, but that was my first thought along those lines. Okay, great, thank you. Great. I hope you got some useful answers there. Do you want to elaborate on that anymore? Okay, thanks very much. And we are starting to wind down here. I hope that you all are sticking with us. Thank you so much. Another question from Alcides. Thank you, Alcides. Implementing a strategy is hard, and there are many factors that make CEOs fail in their mission to materialize their vision into successful factors. What do you think could help them bridge the gap between strategy and implementation, or good strategy and good implementation? I think we kind of spoke to this maybe before, but maybe you can put a finer point.
Well, I don't know. I mean, how can we bridge the gap between strategy and execution? That's like impossible. I'll say it is. You have to go watch my presentation.
I know.
That's the title.
How long do you have? Do you guys have like an hour and a half? I can redo it right now. I can do it on the fly. I'm just going to say leadership. You need leadership to bridge the gap between the strategy and how you're executing on it. That's the simple answer.
Should I ask what that means? What do you mean leadership?
Well, the ability to connect the dots, the ability to see where the work lines up with the strategy, the ability to see where the team need help and support, and setting up that environment where the team will be successful. But firstly, I think is being really clear about the strategy and the top priorities of the strategy, and then making sure that the work that the teams are actually doing is aligned with the high priority strategy. Way too often firms have like 25 or 30 or 50 different priorities that they're working on their strategic plan. They're trying to go for the PMBOK length of a strategic plan, right? Hundreds of pages. Really top 3, top 5, and be really focused on what you're trying to do as an organization, and then make sure that the work the teams are doing lines up with that, and that people are working at the right work at the right time.
Might have an issue if 75% of your projects are priority 1.
There can only be one.
Go
ahead.
Sorry, the motivation of this question actually comes from Bright Light Initiative. I don't know how many of you are aware of this initiative. It's kind of a spin-off from PMI, and they found out that 9 out of 10 CEOs realize that they cannot implement all the initiatives that they have in their strategy, and that was their big motivation to build all the concept behind what they have. And one of the items, or one of the proposals they have that I like the most, is the fact that they say that the ones who design the strategy are not the ones who execute the strategy. So the fact that you don't have this accountability makes the gap, creates this gap, is one of the factors that create this gap. It's all about leadership, as Anne-Marie said as well. And I like the fact that, so I would like to see more CEOs or the executive team or of organizations having the accountability, not only to design these strategies that are beautiful and make beautiful PowerPoints as well, but also to be engaged and involved in the execution and putting that into practice. Yes. I think that would be a game changer when we see that happening.
So
yeah, they need to be engaged, right?
Yeah. There was a study, like this is literally 20 years ago, in 2001, where they showed that the amount of projects that were proposed by senior leaders and executive leaders in terms of their success rate versus the amount of projects that were successful that were proposed by mid-managers and below was like crazy different. So 75% of the projects that were successful were coming from, mid-manager and below. So there's this data gap where there's information at the top that doesn't get to the bottom, and bottom not to the top. And so we still, and this is where Anne-Marie is saying in terms of you can't, there's not a tool or even a process, like you have to have leadership in this space to bridge that gap. Mm-hmm. But yeah, absolutely. No silver bullet here either. Yeah.
But I think it goes back. I mean, I think this is everyday leadership too, right? It's people who are on the ground in the grassroots of these organizations being able to say, no, we're already too busy. And if we stop this to do all this other stuff, then these things are going to suffer. So it's about having the courage to have real conversations about what it takes to do the work, and not being afraid to say, tell me why that's more important than this. And do you really want, choose your priorities? Do you really want to shift the team? Do you understand, the implication of adding this new priority in, because we know that executives don't set the strategy on January 1 and leave it set for the entire year, right? These priorities shift daily. And you know, meanwhile, the teams are working on all this other work and the priorities keep shifting, and different departments have different priorities, and it's like the Wild West. And so I think it comes back down to people who are managing these projects and managing the teams to be able to have the backbone to stop and say, look, you know, you can't keep doing this to these people, and let's get real about the priority and what's going to make a difference for our organization and focus around that.
Yeah, you really speak to empowerment there. And I think that when I asked the question about leadership, I think that to me, my journey as a leader, and if I'm going to strive to be a good leader in all I do, wherever I'm working, whatever I'm doing, is, you know, how am I empowering other people to get it done? It's not
Totally
not me. It's about what am I doing to empower them? And I think what you just said speaks to that. Well, we are winding down here. I would just like to ask everybody on the call to do a real quick exercise to kind of get us to closing out here in one word, not a sentence, just one word. Please, everybody in the chat, just type in what you got from the series. What did you get from this? Did it do anything for you at all? One word, everybody, panelists included. And this will be some fodder for some conversation for sure. Energy. Timely. Well, thanks. That's good. What we got from the series. No, what was that? No, one word. What is that? What we got from the series. Insights, energized. Okay. Comprehension.
Well, I just put that title in so that when someone's looking at the chat, they'll know what this was related to.
Wisdom. That's for
Sorry.
you.
Yeah, I know.
Community, perspective, variety, share. Yeah. Recovery. Diversity. Well, we did just have a diversity right before this, a diversity, what we tried. Leadership, support, +1 perspective. Okay, great. All right, well, we're just about the top of the hour here. I really, again, want to thank all the participants, those of you, even if you didn't make it live, that are watching this on demand. Again, this one will be up for 30 days. The ones before it less so, but again, if you missed them, any of the ones are on demand. If you have any trouble, please, you know, write info@pmicv.org. Let us know. I guess you're having trouble, you wouldn't have heard that. But anyway, we'll send out some more emails. And again, thank you to all the panelists so much. And I got to say, it's with a little bit of melancholy that I say goodbye to you now. It's been great having you guys, and I hope that we'll have you again.
I think we all need to say thank you to Neil for the superb organization and logistics. A ton of work. So we should give him a round of applause.
Absolutely.
I want to especially thank our European folks over in European time zone right now. Geez, GMC, wherever you are. Marcus, go to bed. Have a beer.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Okay, signing off. Until the next time.
Thank you, Neil.
Thanks,
everybody.
Neil.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.